The title of my project is A Step into a Colonial Cookbook. Colonial baking is significant to U.S. history because it gives an insight as to where baking actually began. Colonial baking also gives you a look into the day-to-day life of the colonists. Baking came to the colonies from Europe when the colonists arrived in North America. Though the colonists carried over the pastime of baking, they didn't bring over the idea of the commercial bakery, even though eventually a few did come to be. This meant that all families did all of their baking on their own. And because baking was an all-day job, all the baking for the family's meals for the week was done at one time. For colonial bakers, the oven was the most challenging part of baking. Because ovens weren't attached to stoves until the 1800s, early colonial bakers had to have a beehive oven, which was a separate oven just for baking, or had to bake goods directly over the coals on the stove. Beehives required a lot of attention and upkeep during the baking process. Eventually, the Dutch oven and roasting kitchen would come along to make the process a little bit easier, but there was still no real control for temperature. Colonial bakers used ingredients like rosewater, cinnamon, sugar, nutmeg, molasses, nuts, butter, and flour. In colonial times, recipes were called receipts. Colonists had receipts for many baked goods, including breads, pastries, cookies, pies, and puddings. In this video, I'll be demonstrating a colonial cookie recipe. This recipe is called Kellogg Cookies from the cookbook Breakfast, Luncheon, and Tea by Marion Harlan from 1875. The recipe for the cookies calls for 1 cup of butter, 2 cups of powdered sugar, 3 tablespoons of sour cream, 4 eggs, 5 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of nutmeg, and a handful of currants, but I actually didn't include the fruit in this recipe. The first thing I did was preheat my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. The next thing I did was crack my 4 eggs into a bowl, and then I lightly beat them with my mixer. I then softened my butter by putting it into the microwave, and then I measured out my cups of powdered sugar. Next, I combined the butter and the powdered sugar together, and I mixed it up. I then measured out my 5 cups of flour, and then combined my butter and sugar mixture with my flour. Then I added my sour cream to the mixture, followed by my nutmeg and my baking soda. And this is what my mixture looked like before I mixed it all together. I then mixed it with the spoon a little bit. And then I finally used a mixer. I then used my hands to really knead the mixture together. I didn't have any gloves, so I had to improvise with the bags. I also didn't have a rolling pin, so I did the best I could at flattening out the dough. After the dough was flat, I used a cup to cut it into circles. And this is what it looked like after I had cut the cookies out. I then put the cookies in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. 15 minutes later, I took out the cookies. Finally, I actually tasted the cookies. At first, it didn't really taste that bad, but towards the end, it got kind of bitter and floury. Overall, the cookies weren't bad, and I guess the colonists made do with what they had, but actually this cookie would be pretty good. I think it just needed a little more sugar and maybe some cinnamon or a little more nutmeg to balance out the floury taste, because like I said, at first you can kind of taste the nutmeg, but then the flour really starts to take over and just makes the cookie kind of bland and nasty. Also, the consistency of the cookie was kind of biscuit-like, and I'm not sure if that's because I didn't have a rolling pin or roll the dough out as flat as I could have, or if that's just how the colonists intended it to be.